A Democrat just called Republicans non-player characters on the House floor for passing a bill that literally rewards Donald Trump for illegally stealing congressional funds. The GAO confirmed Trump violated the Impoundment Control Act at least 5 times, targeting blue states that voted against him. Democrats revealed this bill would cost taxpayers money instead of saving it, encourage future presidents to ignore Congress, and codify illegal behavior. And one Republican responded by saying there's no such thing as federal money because every dollar has been seized from American paychecks. This was a House Oversight Committee markup on the Incentivizes Savings Act. The bill claims to save taxpayer money by letting agencies keep unspent funds, but Democrats expose that it actually rewards Trump's illegal withholding of congressional appropriations and destroys the separation of powers. 3 Democrats spent about 10 minutes destroying the constitutional logic.
Strongly oppose this legislation. Despite advocating for agency incentives to identify savings, it contains significant legal, constitutional, and technical problems that would make it both harmful and unworkable. The Trump administration, as we know, has taken drastic actions to illegally withhold and impound funds that it's opposed to, in violation of appropriations law. And this is a bill that would actually incentivize those actions. The GAO has already found at least 5 instances to date of the Trump administration violating the Impoundment Control Act, the law. And more of those decisions could come in the future. The administration illegally froze and cut federal funding for 5 states. OMB also announced a government-wide initiative to identify federal spending provided to state, local, and tribal governments, colleges, and nonprofits in 14 states and D.C. that all voted against President Trump in the 2024 election. This bill would signal to the Trump administration that it endorses their illegal impoundment and withholding of funds that belong to the American people, undermining Congress's power of the purse, and it would reward those actions. All congressional appropriations that have not been spent by the end of its appropriation are already returned to the Treasury. This bill instead splits those unexpended funds, where less than half would return to the Treasury, another 49% would be extended for another year, and 2% would be paid to employees in the form of retention bonuses. Rather than producing savings, CBO will likely estimate a high score for this bill. It will cost money. In addition, the bill contains a series of technical issues that would make it almost impossible to execute. I, like all Democrats on the Oversight Committee and the Congress, want federal agencies to identify savings and eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse in programs and activities wherever possible. And we have a number of good bipartisan bills today that will do that. Unfortunately, this bill would not. I urge my colleagues to oppose it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other members seek recognition on this bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Wynn.
Min?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Comer. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. So last year, Ezra Klein wrote an op-ed. It was titled "The Republican Party's NPC Problem and Ours." And the gist of that is that House Republicans, congressional Republicans, were very comfortable conceding authority to Trump, that they were acting as non-player characters, to use a video game term, and not expressing any agency in standing up for Congress's constitutional prerogatives. Our Article 1 authority is very clear that we have exclusive rights and authorities to appropriate money. And what we've seen over the last 12 months is Donald Trump and this administration, Elon Musk, who's an on-again, off-again buddy of Trump, deciding that they're going to illegally and unconstitutionally infringe upon our Article 1 appropriations authority. And this bill, as Rep. Walkinshaw eloquently expressed, incentivizes future administrations to do the exact same thing. And so I would urge my Republican colleagues to not be non-player characters, to stand up for our constitutional rights here. This is a permanent infringement that you are authorizing and incentivizing. You are basically telling the Trump administration and future administrations that they can ignore Congress, their agencies can withhold funding, and that will just be fine. And in the future, it might be to states like yours, some of the states you represent. It might be to programs that you care about. And so I urge my Republican colleagues to stand up. This bill is just poorly constructed. It is poorly thought out. It creates adverse incentives. and really ex post facto authorizes and condones the unconstitutional and illegal behavior we've seen in violating the Impoundment Control Act and infringing upon our Article 1 authority. So stand up for our constitutional rights, be members of Congress, protect our constitutional authorities here. With that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes you have a unanimous chair. For what purpose does Mr. Walker-Child seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter from CREW, the Project on Government Oversight, Protect Democracy and Public Citizen, which states that the Incentivized Savings Act would, quote, create fiscal chaos rather than fiscal savings.
Without objection, so ordered. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support responsible use of taxpayer dollars, but Congress, not the executive branch, controls federal spending. At a time when this body, under Republican leadership, has chosen to cede our congressional authority over and over and over again to the president, this bill is the exact opposite of what we need. Congress, all of us, need to stand up for our constitutional mandate and protect our appropriations authority, pure and simple. Russ Vought, the head of the OMB and the architect of Project 2025, has been wreaking havoc across our communities by illegally withholding funds, rescinding grants, and reallocating money without the authorization of Congress. From the very beginning of last year, right after Trump's inauguration, we heard from organization after organization after organization in our communities who unexpectedly had their funds frozen and have lived in chaos ever since. That's why the very first bill I introduced was the Office of Management and Budget Inspector General Act. We have to ensure that independent, nonpartisan oversight of the OMB exists so that we can prevent unlawful withholding of funds. H.R. 5438, the bill we are debating today, does the opposite. It rewards agencies for not spending funds Congress has already appropriated, encouraging illegal impoundment. GAO, an independent, nonpartisan watchdog, has found multiple violations of the Impoundment Control Act. Mr. Min laid them out, Mr. Walkinshaw laid them out. We have to stand up for our congressional authority. Congress should not enable this behavior. This bill would increase spending, not reduce it, and it would continue to give this rogue administration a blank check. I oppose the Incentivized Savings Act, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I support this bill. Our republic is $38 trillion in debt. That's $38,000 billion. If we were to run a $1 billion surplus, balance the budget, and run a $1 billion surplus in this body, it would require 38,000 years of billion-dollar surplus. We don't have 38,000 years to fix this thing. We have to rein in federal spending, eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, and theft. And constitutionally, under Article 1, Congress authorizes a project or an endeavor for the federal government and then funds through appropriations that authorized federal government action. And then under Article 2, the executive branch has administrative authority, and they're responsible for spending the money and executing the federal endeavor that was authorized and funded by Congress. And within the framework of the execution of that federal endeavor, the executive branch has a responsibility to audit the bureaucratic performance of that authorized and funded endeavor, and they're responsible to identify what's cited in this law as incompetence and failure. And we have a responsibility to control the expenditures therein. Money that Congress authorizes and appropriates for a particular purpose must be executed in a manner that's reflective of an absence of incompetence and failure, waste, fraud, abuse, and theft. This is common sense. So the American citizenry that we serve, Mr. Chairman, demands enhanced control of their treasure, because it is their treasure. There's no such thing as federal money. Every dollar that comes into this town has been seized from the paycheck of an American working citizen. I vigorously support this bill and many like it that codifies the efforts of President Trump's team and this executive branch, which is determined to eliminate waste, fraud, abuse, and theft from the federal sphere of spending that has driven us to a $38 trillion debt. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
Let me give you the receipts on what you just watched, because this is worse than it looks. First, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974. This law exists because Richard Nixon tried to withhold funds Congress appropriated. He said, "I don't like what Congress funded, so I'm just not going to spend the money." Congress said that's unconstitutional, you don't have that power, and passed the Impoundment Control Act. The law is simple. If the president is appropriated funds by Congress, he must spend them. If he wants to rescind the funds, he has to ask Congress for permission. He can't just decide on his own. The Government Accountability Office is an independent watchdog that determines whether administrations violate this law. And according to GAO reports from 2025, the Trump administration has violated the Impoundment Control Act at least 5 times. 5 confirmed violations. Let me tell you what those violations look like. Trump's OMB froze federal funding to 5 states without congressional authorization. They announced an initiative to identify and potentially withhold funds from 14 states plus D.C. that voted against Trump in 2024. That's not governing, that's punishment. And here's what makes this bill insane. It would reward that behavior. The bill says if agencies don't spend their full appropriation, they can keep 49% of the unspent funds for another year, give 2% to employees as bonuses, and send 49% back to Treasury. Sounds fine until you realize what it actually incentivizes. If an agency illegally refuses to spend money Congress appropriated, this bill lets them keep half of it and reward employees for the refusal. You just created a financial incentive to violate the Impoundment Control Act. Now let's talk about what David Trone said, because this is devastating. Trone referenced an Ezra Klein op-ed called The Republican Party's NPC Problem. NPC stands for non-player character. In video games, NPCs are characters controlled by the game, not by the player. They just do whatever they're programmed to do. No independent thought, no agency. Trone's argument is that Republicans have become NPCs for Trump. They're not exercising their constitutional authority, they're just doing whatever Trump wants, even when it violates their own power. And he's right. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the exclusive power to appropriate funds, not the president, not OMB, Congress. When Trump withholds funds Congress appropriated, he's violating Article 1. And when Republicans pass a bill that rewards him for doing it, they're admitting they don't care about their own constitutional authority. Trone begged Republicans, don't be non-player characters. Stand up for your constitutional rights. This is a permanent infringement you're authorizing. It might be your state next. It might be programs you care about. And that's the key point. This isn't about Trump. It's about precedent. If Republicans let Trump violate the Impoundment Control Act and then pass a bill rewarding it, every future president will do the same thing. Democrat or Republican. Marie Gluesenkamp Perez brought up Russ Vought. Vought is the head of OMB and the architect of Project 2025. And since Trump's inauguration, Vought has been wreaking havoc. Perez said from the very beginning of last year, right after Trump's inauguration, We heard from organization after organization in our communities who unexpectedly had their funds frozen and have lived in chaos ever since. That's not theoretical. That's real people. Nonprofits that rely on federal grants woke up one day to find their funding frozen. No warning, no explanation, just chaos. And the bill Democrats are voting on today would make that easier. It would tell OMB, if you withhold funds, you get to keep half. If you refuse to spend what Congress told you to spend, here's a bonus. That's not fiscal responsibility. That's incentivizing constitutional violations. So here's what this actually means. Trump has violated the Impoundment Control Act at least 5 times, according to GAO. He targeted states that voted against him. He froze funds to punish communities. And Republicans just passed a bill that rewards agencies for not spending appropriated funds. The CBO will likely score this bill as costing money, not saving it, because agencies will game the system to keep funds and pay bonuses. But more importantly, this bill destroys the separation of powers. Congress appropriates. The executive spends. That's the system. This bill says the executive can just decide not to spend and keep the money. That's not a budget reform. That's a power grab. Here's what this is really about. Republicans are so desperate to defend Trump that they'll pass bills that violate their own constitutional authority. Democrats are begging them to stand up, stop being NPCs, protect Congress's power of the purse. And Republicans responded by saying every dollar is seized from American paychecks, so actually Trump should have more power to withhold it. That's not fiscal conservatism. That's surrendering Article 1. Before you go, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this with someone who needs to understand what's actually happening.